I'm Jeffrey U. Warren, Innovator in Residence at the Library of Congress, and I'm going to show you the research portion of the Relational Reconstruction Toolkit. So in this portion of the guide, I walk through the process of finding images, but also interpreting them and trying to piece together what each one shows and how they relate to each other.
Part 1. Research. This is a guide to finding and gathering clues to places which have been erased. Neighborhoods and communities who were not included in archives during their time, and whose traces we can find mostly through the in-between glimpses, the cracks and gaps, the unsaid and the hidden away. Most of what we find through this process is not the real story. It's the selective forgetting, overwriting, and reshaping of histories, despite which we will try to see people, their spaces, and the things they cared about. It's the first part of an evolving guide to relational reconstruction, a set of practices for creating an immersive, virtual, or 3D reconstruction of an erased neighborhood, such as the one I've begun to craft in the Seeing Providence Chinatown project, about the neighborhood which existed on Empire Street in Providence, Rhode Island, until December 1914. This project and the relational reconstruction methodology I envision is focused on memory, remembrance, and personal relationships to histories. It's not a work of history or formal archiving, but a way for us to reckon with the past and its meanings to us today and in the future in personal terms. Think of this as a journey through these materials which you can chart with love, perhaps guiding your community around the hazards and pitfalls of the archival lens, to be close with, to share space with, histories and spaces which we often must glimpse through the cracks. It's a meditation, the searching, handling these artifacts with tenderness, not picking them apart like meat from a bone or gems from the soil, gathering them together with gentle hands, healing yourself as you glimpse them, giving them recognition and rest. A note of caution. To those beginning to look through these histories, please take care of yourself. In this work, you'll come across material which will be painful to read, including violence, but also the diminution of violence, even from present-day historians and archivists. There will be people who don't understand this pain or how they can add to it. Take breaks and deep breaths. Listen to something calming. The kind of justice we seek in relational reconstruction is through remembrance and connection. It may be someone else's important work to hold themselves accountable for these acts. It may even be yours on another occasion. But our goal here and now is to see beyond those painful parts, to try to connect with people's lives, people who might be your ancestors or who walked a path your ancestors would later. Searching for images. First, if you can, visit the place as it is today. It might be a virtual visit, or maybe a visit through scenes in a movie set in the place. For some places, I visited using Google Street View. Online image search. Searching for Providence Chinatown won't bring up many photos of what the neighborhood used to look like. Some show the area after Chinatown was destroyed. Many of the glimpses we can find of the neighborhood are incidental, in the background of photographs of other things. Looking in the background is how I would describe my approach for many of the images I was able to find of Providence's Chinatown. See how in this image, the same building to the left side, which on careful inspection has an awning labeled Oriental Restaurant, appears again in a second image from the Rhode Island State Archives, again in the background of a photograph of Central Baptist Church, with ladders leaning against it. I used Google and DuckDuckGo to image search by keyword, and these search terms can work for online archives as well. You can begin to develop a list of search terms to work from. Mine included some of the following: The last few are of small streets and alleys that no longer exist. These search terms can also work in the Library of Congress's various search systems, such as the Prints and Photos Division Search. You may have to skim through hundreds of photos. Sanborn maps were created by the Sanborn Insurance Company every few years for most cities since the late 1800s. These can provide detailed context for photographs and other records, as well as addresses, details on entryways, and even staircases or roofing. I use the website cinematreasures.org, which includes a detailed user-contributed history of stage theaters, from construction dates to name changes to photographs, and even dating images based on the posters of shows currently playing. I looked at the Photos and Comments tabs of a page to see user contributions. So many pictures I found had no people in them, and those that did were often hard to place. Some were posed portraits or had blurry backgrounds. As you sift through these photos, keep in mind our goal, to try to understand the neighborhood as it would have wanted to be remembered, not as a museum artifact or a long-ago fable. I asked myself, what would people here have wanted for me as an Asian American living in 2023? Regular events and celebrations nearby can be useful search terms. Examples that helped in Providence, Chinatown include Chinese New Year, while in Deadwood, South Dakota, Chinese Americans participated in town parades and competitions like the Hub and Hub race on July 4th, 1888, and are featured in several photographs of the event. Newspapers were, for me, the heaviest part of the research process. Due to the constant use of racist language, the casual lack of respect or care for Asian Americans, and the accounts of police harassment, violence, and erasure which pervades coverage. But there was a lot of information in these archives, and I felt a responsibility to sift through them to find what I could. This sometimes meant searching every article of every issue of a newspaper for days or weeks following a major event. I've been very interested in how early Chinese American and Asian American newspapers covered lives of people in their own communities, and have found a number of resources for in-community newspapers, which you can find in the bibliography. Personal, family, and community collections are, of course, the most likely to include items which can give us insight into the lives of people in otherwise erased historic communities of color. But they often exist as the result of careful private stewardship for generations. And families whose histories have been systematically excluded and erased from official white institutions' collections, or whose histories have been represented in racist ways, may be very cautious about how their stories and collections are shared and to whom. Tracking images. In researching Providence's Chinatown, I found that I quickly collected dozens and eventually hundreds of photos, as well as web pages and archives I needed to follow up on. Tracking where each one came from, which I wanted to return to for a more detailed look, quickly became a challenge. This is a spreadsheet I used to organize my record keeping. You don't have to use my system, but I'll share how it works and why. First, it's a working document, not a formal bibliography. In it, I note buildings by construction or destruction dates, addresses, and include notes and links. Using these tracking spreadsheets can surface important connections. Using names from newspaper articles, court records, and other sources, I've been able to reconstruct a rough directory of who lived or worked at each address in Providence's Chinatown. But be aware, these records are incredibly fragmentary and partial, and relying primarily on these kinds of accounts, with their racist views and understandings, risks giving those perspectives too much control over the way we understand these histories, especially when they are our own. Saidiya Hartman has written about the limits of the archive as a resource for knowledge of the lives of enslaved people during the transatlantic slave trade, and the possibilities of what she terms critical fabulation in overcoming these limits. Jamelle Bouie writes about the limitations of ledgers and numerically based analysis based in the bureaucracy of enslavement, and what it cannot tell us. Find more information and links in the Inspirations page of the written guide. Mapping photos. As you collect more and more photos, you'll need to keep track of what each photograph represents spatially. Placing them onto a map can be a powerful means of organizing what you know and don't know. Can you locate the buildings in a photo on the map? I copy-pasted or dragged images into a Google presentation like this. As you find more images, you can start to see which buildings you haven't been able to see in a photograph, and how good a photo source you have for each building. Over time, this map will grow as you gain a richer understanding of the way these images fit together to give you a sense of the neighborhood.
That wraps up this tutorial. For more information, you can see the written guide online.